Of course, there's more to working with a database than just querying it for documents. Now that we know how to get the documents that we want, we're going to learn how to update those documents. So the main way to update a document is, of course, by using the update method. We call the update method on a collections object. So for example, db.users.update. And the first parameter that we pass to this update method is a query object, much like the ones we've been using with the find method. So let's say name.first is going to equal John. We want to find the records where the name.first field is equal to John. The second parameter is the update object. So in this case, let's say that we want to set the job equal to developer. That's all the parameters we need for now. So I'll go ahead and close that function and run it. Now, of course, we don't get any output, but the function was run behind the scenes. Now, this probably doesn't do what you think it did. So let's talk about the two general methods of updating documents. The first one is to update by replacement, and the second method is to update by modification. What we've done here is update by replacement. This second object that we passed in here completely replaced whatever record it found that matched the first object. You can see that this is the case if we run db.users.find, and then if we do for each print JSON, you can see right down here at the bottom that this document here only has job and developer. Now it's going to have the same ID that the document that we found did, but all of the other fields have been completely replaced with the document that we passed in. This, of course, was our John Doe object, and now we've completely lost our John Doe user information because we did a replacement instead of a modification. Now we're going to talk about modification a little bit later on, but for right now, let's cover a few of the other features that our update method here offers to us. This update method will, of course, only work if it finds a document that matches the query object. If it finds no documents that match the query object, well, then it has nothing to update. However, sometimes what you want to do is either find an existing document that matches your query object, or if there is no document that matches your query object, then you just want to create a new one with whatever fields you specify. And this is called doing an upsert. Think insert or update. We can do an upsert by setting the third parameter as true. So let's say we want to search for a user where the name is Kate Wills, and we want to replace that document with a document that has a name of Kate Wills and a job of Lisp developer. Now, if we go ahead and run this right now, and now do db.users.find where the name is Kate Wills, you'll see that we get nothing back. And this is because it couldn't find a document that had a name of Kate Wills to replace with the document we put here, so nothing happened. However, if I set true as the third parameter here, this will now do an upsert. So since it can't find a document that matches this one, it will just add a new document that matches this one. So if we go ahead and do that and rerun our find query, you can see that we have saved a new document to the database that has the properties that we just defined. So that's about all I can say about updating by replacement. It's not really complicated, you just find your documents and replace them, but it's not really that useful. In most cases, I think what you're going to want to do is update by modification. This is where you use one or more of the modification operators to update the document that's currently there. This is where you use one or more modification operators to update the fields of a document that's already in your database. So let's look at some of these operators. Probably the most simple one is the increment operator. I'm going to start here just by creating an n object to make it really easy for us to query for the link that has a title of nettuts. So now I can say db.links.find and I can just pass it n and it will find that. And in this case, I also want to just set the title to 1 and the favorites value to 1 as well. So if I do this, you can see that the title here is nettuts and the favorites value is 110. Now let's say we want to increment that favorites value by, say, 1. What we'll do here is say db.links.update. We'll use n again as our query object. And now we're going to use an operator inside of our modification object here. The operator is the increment operator, which is $inc. And we set the value of this to another object, which will have the field as its key. So in this case, favorites, and the number to increment by as the value. So in this case, I could just say 5. And if I do that and then rerun our search query, you can see that favorites here is now 115 instead of just 110 because we've incremented it by 5. Now we can also do this with negative numbers. So I can increment this by -5 to bring it back down to 110. So this gives you your first glimpse into how these modification operators work. In the case of the query operators, you would usually have the key out here and then the operator inside this object working on some value that way. With modification operators, it's the other way around. The operator is on the outside of the object, and then the key and the value that we're adjusting the key by is going to be inside the object that is the value of our operator key. Now, often you will want to update a document by actually changing the value of a given field, probably a text field most often. Let's set up another query object here, and this will find the document where the name is Kate Wills, that user that we just created. So right now, if we do a db.users.find on Q, you can see that she just has a name field and a job field. Let's say we want to change Kate's job. We can do db.users.update, Q to find Kate, and then we want to use the set operator. And the set operator takes the name of the field that we want to change, and then we give it the value that we wanted to change to. So here we can just say web developer, like that. And now, when I run this and refind Kate, you can see that Kate now has a job of web developer instead of a job of Lisp developer. Now, this also works with fields that don't exist yet. So we can set the email here to say katewills@gmail.com. And now, if I run find again, you can see that Kate does have an email address, even though we didn't already have an email field. So we can use set to either change a field or add a completely new field to the given document. Now, we can also get rid of fields this way. Let's say we want to get rid of that job field because none of our other users have a job field. So again, db.users.update, we'll pass it the query object. And then this time we want to say that we want to unset a field. We want to unset the job field, and we do have to give it the value for the job field. So I do have to say that the job is a web developer. If I rerun the query, you can see that we only have email and name, and the job field here has been unset or completely removed from the document. Well, there are a couple of other different modifications operators, but we're going to save those for the next screencast. Now that I've given you a taste of how updating by replacement and updating by modification work, I want to wrap this video up by telling you a little bit more about the update method, and then showing you some other methods that you can also use to update a document. I should tell you that the update method only updates the first matching document that it finds. If you'd like it to update multiple records at a time, you need to use the multi-parameter, and that means setting true as the fourth parameter. Note, however, that this only works when you're doing updates by modification and not by replacement. So whenever you have the fourth parameter as true, you have to include that third parameter as false. Currently, we have a user whose first name is Jane, so let's go ahead and create another user whose first name is Jane. We're just going to insert here where the name, and then we will have first is Jane. We'll just keep this really bare bones. We don't need to add any more. So now when we do users.find where the name.first is equal to Jane, and we'll limit this to just returning the name field, you can see that we have two users whose first name is Jane. So now let's say db.users.update. We want to update where the name.first is equal to Jane. And what we want to do is set a job to, we'll just say developer. Now, if we run this query like this right now, then if I rerun our find query, and I should include job in the fields we're letting through here, notice that our first field right here, Jane Wilson, has a field of job that equals developer, but the last document with the first name of Jane does not. And this shows you how when we're not using the multi-parameter, we only update the first document that we found. Of course, Jane Wilson was put into the database before Jane without a last name, therefore she was the one who got the job of developer. However, let me rerun this update query, and I'll have to set the third parameter to false because we're not doing upserts, and then the multi-parameter to true. And now if we rerun the query, you can see that both Janes have the job of developer. So that's updating multiple records at once. Now you may recall back when we were looking at inserting documents that I mentioned the save method. The save method gets past a document, and if the document is not already in the database, meaning it doesn't have an _ID field, it will insert that as a new document. However, if it does have an ID field, it's going to use the document that it was passed to replace the document with the matching ID. This is great if we want to retrieve a single document, make changes to it, and then go ahead and save it back. So let's go ahead and create a variable called Bob, and we'll do db.users.find1, remember, and we want to find where the name.first is equal to Bob. And now you can see here that we have our Bob document. So now I can set the job of Bob. Let's say Bob's job is a server admin. So now if I clear our screen and redisplay the Bob object, you can see that right down here we have the job of server admin. Now I can do db.users.save and pass it the Bob object. Now that I've passed it the Bob object, I can say db.users.find where name.first is equal to Bob. And you can see that this document does have the job field that we just added to it. So that's how you could use the save method to update a given document. So there's one more method I want to talk about for updating a single document at a time, and that is the find and modify method. This method takes a single object as its parameter, but this object of course has several properties, so let's look at how that would work. One of the best things about the find and modify method is that it will return the document to you once the method is finished running. So let's go ahead and query for a name field of Kate Wills. Then let's go ahead and say what we want to do in the update. So we can go ahead and say we want the update to set her age to 20. Finally, we'll add one more property this time, and this will be new. Now by default, new is false. We're going to set it to true, which means that the document that will be returned from the find and modify method will be the updated object. If we wanted to get the object before the updates were actually made returned, we would just set new to false, or even better, not even put the property in because it defaults to false. But I'm going to go ahead and set it to true, and that is all that we need for this object. So I'll close the object off, and when I hit enter here, you can see that we have our Kate object returned here, and the age has been set to 20. Now if I was to go ahead and rerun this query, maybe changing the age to 30, and I took the new property out completely, you can see that what's returned says that the age is still 20. But if I do a db.users.find where the name is equal to Kate Wills, then you can see here that the age was updated to 30, but because we didn't have the new property, what was returned was the unupdated version. Now this find and modify method will only modify the first document that it finds that matches our query. Because of this, you may want to include a sort property in your options objects, so let's look at that. We know that we have two documents in our links collection right now that have a favorites value of 110. So let's go ahead and find and modify one of them. In this case, the query will be anywhere where the favorites value equals 110, and the update is going to increment that favorites value by 10. However, we want to sort this so that we are sorting by title 1, which means we're sorting ascendingly by the title so that we get alphabetically the first document returned. In this case, that should be Audible audiobooks. We do want to get the new version back, so let's pass new true. And then we'll do one more, and this is the fields property. This is just like the field selector object that you could pass as the second parameter to the find method. In here, we can just choose which fields we want to be returned. So let's say that we want the title field returned, and we want the favorites field returned. Also, I'll just exclude the ID, close the entire object, close the method. Now, when I run this, it seems that I forgot a colon after the favorites field here. So let me just arrow up and replace that colon. And now you can see that we have the title and the favorites field returned to us. Those are the two fields that we asked for it to be returned from the document, which means that the sorting worked as well because I said to sort ascendingly, so we would choose alphabetically the first one, Audible audiobooks, and we found a document that was at 110 and incremented the favorites by 10 and returned the new version, so that's why favorites here is at 120. So it looks like our find and modify query worked just perfectly. Well, that's going to be all that we will do for this screencast. In the next screencast, we're going to cover the rest of the modifier operators.